Started the day with a nice, easy, early morning breakfast at the rooftop restaurant, looking out over a very hot Phnom Penh. I was picked up by the guide and taken to the Royal Palace, which is very Thai in its appearance, although it's actually Khmer. So it's still a working palace, and the king lives here with his mum. Never married. Strange that. Anyway, beautifully laid out and beautiful architecture and gardens. I discovered that the Cambodians have different colours for different days of the week, ranging from red on a Monday to black on a Sunday. So often people do choose their colours for the day. Another beautiful palace, or they call it a pagoda. And around the walls of this one is the entire Indian Ramayana, or however you call it, showing the entire story. You couldn't film inside all of the buildings, but one of them had an interesting fashion show display showing what the traditional costumes were, which have varied over the years and which they still get dressed up in for traditional dance. After that, the next stop was to drive to the Genocide Museum, which I wasn't particularly looking forward to. This is a very prominent feature, and I think it's something to do with the celebration of the reunification. There were lots of pagodas like this around, which really are quite ordinary for them. Then we got to the Genocide Museum, and you couldn't film a lot of it, which was horrifying. This is the cell that the last survivor, who's 93, that I met a few minutes later, lived in, and there were horrible exhibits inside detailing just how bad humans can be to each other, and detailing how they were tortured until they basically gave up their will and confessed to all sorts of utter nonsense that could barely be believed, but was then justification for executing them. They were all eventually broken, and that was the aim. You just despair at how inhuman people can be. And there's a selection of skulls. There was something like almost 3 million people killed by the insane Pol Pot. There are 3 survivors who were at the museum, and this is the eldest at 93, who published a book which I bought explaining his life, and I got a picture with him. There's another chap who's younger but doesn't speak, and there's a younger chap still who I didn't talk to. But it is absolutely harrowing. I read his book afterwards, and there's me sitting with him. After that, we then drove out of town, and it was interesting as we got back to the outskirts that there was phenomenal amounts of development and new houses being built that were anything from £500,000 to £1 million each. Astonishing for a country where the average wage is about $150 a month, and it's all the product of corruption. Astonishing to see that most of it is funded by Chinese or Koreans or even Americans. So this is the Killing Fields Museum, and this is what they call a stupa with about 20,000 skulls in it, which I didn't really want to go around. And then we were shown the various methods of execution and the killing fields, where they just did mass burials of people. Words cannot describe what you think about it. There you are, mass grave of 450 people. This is harrowing. They put walkways on there because they found that where people walked through, they were basically bringing up bones. There were just so many bones in the ground. There were mass graves everywhere, including bizarre ones where the bodies had their heads cut off, and it was thought that it was guards who they felt had failed to follow their orders. Then there was, as I say, you can see bones actually poking out of the ground, which have been cordoned off. And there's another example of a pit where hundreds of people are buried in there that hasn't been excavated yet. That's where mothers and babies were killed. And the mothers would be led there blindfold with their babies. Then they take the blindfold off and they were made to watch as the babies were beaten against the tree before the mothers were then killed.
Yeah.
The way they kill?
Yeah, the way that they kill a baby, like hold a baby leg and swing a baby head against the tree. This is called a killing tree. All the bracelet that you see on the tree is a gift from the local, a gift from the tourists. They kill a baby different way by throw a baby up to the sky and use a bayonet touch a baby.
These are just some of the bones in the ground and then teeth on the far corner, as you can see. And this is a tree where they put a loudspeaker on so that people couldn't hear the screams of people being murdered. So after that we drove back into Phnom Penh to visit Wat Nom, which is what the town is named after, and related the story of how a grandmother found a sacred log in the river and then built this huge silver sort of stone monument in time, and that's basically what the town was named after. And there was a shrine there where people brought offerings, then gave them to these tigers and then put them on the side for offerings to bring them good luck and so on. And inside, this was the shrine with lots and lots of Buddhas, and on the left hand side the grandmother who started it all is immortalized. You get the impression that the Buddhist religion is very much a more happy religion than, for example, Christianity or Muslims or others. There's much more emphasis on goodness and being kind to people. This is the giant monument itself, which can be seen for miles around, and all the various offerings at the bottom of it. This gives you a better idea of the sheer enormity. And then after that, went on a tuk-tuk with her back to the hotel, because I hadn't been on one before, and she did the negotiation of the price, which was quite interesting and not as scary as I thought. I then got a tuk-tuk after a break to do a river cruise. Although when I looked at the boat when I got there, I thought, God, this isn't looking too good. But then I was joined by another group of about 5 people, a couple of Kiwis, a couple of Australians and a lady from Derbyshire. And we had a really nice evening cruising out along the Mekong and seeing the contrast beside, on one side of it, people living in temporary houses, living on a hand-to-mouth fishing existence on one side of the waterway, and on the other side, billionaire status hotels. I just can't believe that it's so developed. And then as the night fell, it got good, and there's that amazing skyscraper with like the entire side of it is a waterfall and graphics. Then docking the boat back in, it just sort of rammed itself in between a couple, and the group of us then walked onto the clothes market, which was pretty much like every clothes market. There they had open night mic for karaoke, and there were lots and lots of fakes there, but some of the spelling had gone a bit wrong on some of them.